The problem is people who don't want have that secured, I think it's because they want to cheat. Otherwise, we need ID for everything else that's important. Our elections are extremely important.
As far as I know, I don't think on my ID it says where I was born. The cheapest ID that you could use is a passport, because that says where you were born. Because how many Americans have a passport? Half, maybe? Hello and welcome back to Perspective Exchange, where we talk about the recent news and we go back and forth on different opinions held by different people in the United States. My name is Andrew Dunn. You might call me a leftist, a progressive. You might even call me a democratic socialist. I believe in equity and equality across the board. With me, as always, is my co-host, Joe Pangaro. Say hi to the people, Joe.
Hey, everybody. Joe Pangaro here, right? So I spent my whole life dealing with justice and doing the right things. I'm a conservative, traditional American, and I kind of look at the world through that lens, though I am open-minded.
This week, we'd like to talk a little bit about the SAVE Act, which would require a registered ID to allow people to register to vote in the United States. This, to me, reads a lot like a poll tax, and before our Polish friends get up in arms, we're not taxing you specifically, but rather a tax on being able to vote, which is unconstitutional. But Joe, what are your feelings on this?
Well, first of all, I had a little bit of a cold this week, and I decided, I needed something for my cold. So I went to the store and I said, "Oh, can I have some cold and sinus medication?" And they said, "Absolutely, you can have it. Can I see your ID?" And I said, "Well, why do I need ID for a cold?" "Well, we want to make sure that you're not buying it inappropriately." I said, "Okay, that's all right." So I left there and I said, "You know what? I'd like a nice adult beverage on my way home." And I stopped in, and believe it or not, I got they asked me for my ID when I went in there. Now, of course, I'm kidding, but you need ID to buy that. We need ID for everything. I went to get on an airplane. They want 17 kinds of identification. Having an identification to prove who you are, to make sure that our elections are fair and legitimate, is not a high ask. The problem is people who don't want have that secured, I think it's because they want to cheat. Otherwise, we need ID for everything else that's important. Our elections are extremely important.
So I'd like to call you out on a small thing. This is actually, oddly enough, this is going to be something that we really get into, I think. It's funny because the past few episodes, we've done a great job of showing where we can meet in the middle and, where we can let some things go. And you know what, you're right about this. I still have problems with this other thing. But overall, this is something that's very important to me. I think it was the last time we had the episode, the last time we recorded, you had mentioned that, you have a problem with something, no problem. You just have to figure out how to make it work with the legislature. Congress has to be able to pass a law. It is currently unconstitutional to require payment to make it so people can vote. And if you don't like that, you have to go through Congress. This, to me, is the biggest issue. Or the other thing you can do, hey, we want to have ID. Here's a great way to meet in the middle. We're going to socialize it. Everybody gets a free ID. I'm perfectly happy with that, being a person who is very much in favor of social programs. Everybody gets a free ID. But I also do want to call out a lot of people on the right for being oddly okay with forcing people to register in order to be able to do something that is their God-given right as an American citizen. When the left tries to bring up registering, say, a firearm, there's a lot of pushback for that. I don't quite there are states in the U.S. where you can just pay cash, no ID necessary, you get a firearm, no questions asked. And this is referred to as the gun show loophole. So for me, the biggest issue, going back to it, is really just that it is unconstitutional because it requires payment. You have to pay in order to vote if this goes through.
How do you have to pay would be the question I would have. Everyone has ID. In this day and age, to say that people do not have identification is an excuse. To say that people can't get the ID or to conflate it with 17 other things, I think is really absurd. And what it does is it points out the reality. If we look beyond all the excuses why we shouldn't do this for voting, is because then it conflates the reality that we have. How many thousands of people are they discovering that are illegally on the voting rolls? Dead people we know vote all the time. And if we remove that, our elections would be much more realistic. We would be able to have more confidence in them. And the fact that it's one party versus another on this has to tell you, why would someone have anything to gain out of that? All of the reasons they've come up with, well, our minority people, they can't get IDs. It's too difficult for them. That is so demeaning, and that is so ridiculous in this modern world to say a thing like that, that people can't get ID. You need ID for everything. To say now, oh, women can't go vote because if they got married, it's absolutely absurd. And we start to see that they're ridiculous arguments. Why would you have that argument? It's a simple thing. We have to do ID for everything. When you find out something's a problem, our elections should be so sacred to us that we are willing to protect them at all costs. And if you find that, I think they said 80% of people, including Democrats, think we should have ID to vote, kind of tells you this is something the American people want. We want our elections to be fair and free from fraud. And we know that there's fraud involved.
Yeah, unfortunately, and this is so weird, where we have gotten to the point where now the leftist is the constitutional traditionalist. It's unconstitutional. And like, I hear you. Again, I'm not against having to prove that you are who you say you are. But at the end of the day, it's in the Constitution that you can't do it. And so this is the thing that is really the pushback for me. I know a lot of people who can't afford. Look, can they afford to have IDs? Maybe, but then they don't get to do something else that they want to do. The other thing is that, as far as I know, I don't think on my ID it says where I was born. So, the idea is that based on the way it's written in the SAVE Act, and I think that the Democrats have introduced a secondary, like a response to it, that changes some things. But in the initial one, the cheapest ID that you could use is a passport, because that says where you were born. And it has to say where you were born on the ID that you are using. So this is where it gets kind of tricky, because how many Americans have a passport? Half, maybe, at best. And now you're saying everyone has to get a passport or an equivalent in order to be able to vote. This is, if we are all going to say that we require identification in order to register to vote, there needs to be a foundational groundwork that is put in place first before we do this. One, we need an amendment to the Constitution. You got to do that first. Because if you are requiring payment to allow people to vote, that is unconstitutional. Full stop. If you want to make it a viable option, you also have to introduce something that at least makes it more affordable, or, you provide a birth certificate. I think it's been a very long time since I've had a driver's license, or since I've had to prove and get it initially, whatever. I think you have to provide a birth certificate, social security card in order to get a driver's license or a state ID. That being said, it doesn't seem like that would be good enough for the people who are putting this legislation up for vote.
Well, I just had recently here in New Jersey, I had to get a real ID. And I look it up, and I have a driver's license. It's a legitimate driver's license. When I got my license several years ago, you have to show a proof of your driver's license, a utility bill, 7 other things, but it doesn't have the little star on it to get on an airplane. You need to have your passport if you don't have a real ID. So I called up and I said, what do I need? And they told me you need these 4 or 5 things, a birth certificate. I went down, I presented it all, and I got my real ID. That is considered a real ID. It's a government-approved identification card. If you were to tell me that if I had to walk up and pay $10 to vote, anybody had to pay $10 to vote, I would agree with you. I would be stomping mad. I would say absolutely not, because that would be requiring payment to vote, and that is inappropriate. That's not constitutional. But to say you need to identify who you are appropriately is simple. To say people don't have birth certificates, everyone has a birth certificate. Everyone can get a birth certificate. But I would even offer something even better. We spend billions and billions of dollars in this country on wasted things. I would say to cover the rural people who maybe can't get to the local DMV, or they can't get an ID, I would say set up mobile ID units. Let's pay for that to make sure that every single person has a legitimate ID. We check them out. We find out who they are. We hand them their ID right then and there. That to me is worth the time and the effort to make sure our elections are safe.
Are you saying for free for those people?
For free, absolutely.
Okay, we're
How
in
much
agreement
how
there.
much do we pay in taxes, and it's wasted? Let's just go to the governor of Minnesota and say, when you get back those billions of dollars that were stolen in fraud, we're going to use that to drive around and make sure everyone has an ID. That is a legitimate use of our group money because it benefits all of us to make sure our elections are safe and sound. And are there people that can't get an ID? I think there are, of course, if you look across the country, there's going to be people that cannot get to the place to get it. They lost their birth certificate. It's a burden for them mentally. Well, then let's get them ID. It's not that hard. These are simple things. We went to the moon. We can figure out how to get everybody an ID.
Well, great. Never thought I'd say this or see the day, but welcome to the Socialist Party. And the Bernie hats are in the back. We've got some bumper stickers for you as well. I also want to point out that what we're talking about, if you're talking about, say, what the SAVE Act is doing is saying, you need a passport or a driver, even a driver's license or whatever it is, that probably won't stop the issue of people who have died, quote, voting, people voting on their behalf, because you can just go into that person's purse, or you probably have it saved. It's probably still in your desk somewhere. You can still just grab that and go, walk into the voting place, say, hi, I'm me, and show your actual ID and go vote, and then do a lap around the block and come back with your great-great-great-great-grandfather's ID and do it again.
There are always going to be fraudsters. There's always going to be people that are going to cheat. It's the wholesale gigantic numbers of fraud that could flip an election one way or another.
Yeah.
How many small elections do we see across the country that are 27 votes, and it makes a difference who gets elected? That's important to all those people in that community and to the people that ran for office. So it should be right. So let me pose the question to you this way, Andrew. If we could wipe away all the concerns you had about it costs anything, it costs nothing. We're going to give them a free ID. We're going to guarantee everyone gets one. Do you think we should do it then so that people can be positive in who's voting in the election?
I still have reservations. I'm way more likely to be on board. My reservations include, I don't know that that's what we should be spending our tax money on. There's probably better things right now. I mean, you're saying if all of my things are free, if we live in a utopia and we've got everything covered and nobody's hungry.
That's where you guys want to go to, right? Utopia,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, well, yeah,
make-believe land.
Sure, yeah. I mean, to be fair, for anyone who's actually read it, the book Utopia is about a horrible place, which is always so funny that people talk about a utopia versus a dystopia, when in the book Utopia was a dystopia. But that all notwithstanding, non sequiturs aside, yeah, if you can fix all of that, I get a little bit closer. I do have some reservations. Again, I am hesitant. It's like, hey, Andrew, don't you want to register everybody on a federal database? Maybe. You know what I mean? I bring it up to, I put the shoe on the other foot. Hey, we're going to pass a law that says that all people who buy a firearm have to be registered in a system, and you have to have registration and insurance on your firearm in case anything happens. I think a lot of the right is like, F no, I'm not doing that. That'd be a horrible idea. And here we are saying, regardless of firearms, we're going to make everybody do it. Maybe. Again, still a little bit of reservation, but I'm way. If you can eliminate the thing about the SAVE Act that really bugs me is the poll tax issue. And look, you can say, well, technically it's not a tax, whatever. That's a loophole. The reasoning behind the poll tax amendment, which I believe is the 24th Amendment, is that people had to pay to be able to vote. If you don't have an ID, you currently have to pay. So if you can waive that, I'm like halfway there. It makes up a huge distance.
Excellent. Welcome to the world of common sense. You see?
Yeah, welcome to the right. The stickers are in the back,
right,
MAGA
exactly.
hats.
See,
Yeah.
That was a good point you gave me there. I like that. Yeah, it's one of those things that we have got to find a way to work our through, because people do not have confidence in the elections. We have all of this back and forth. It was stolen. It wasn't stolen. And sometimes things are stolen. It's not right. It's not fair to either party. You go out and you present your ideas, and if people think your ideas are better, they vote for it. They deserve to have the government that they vote for. It shouldn't be stolen from anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It should be a bipartisan issue. It does get very murky when, I think, for example, before the results of the 2016 election even came in, Donald Trump said, this whole thing is rigged. And then he won. And everyone was like, oh, is it? And all of a sudden, and then the next day he was like, well, it's not that rigged,
Right, and Hillary's the one saying, well, this was rigged.
I know. It's very hard when whoever loses says it's rigged.
And when we look at these kind of things in our society, how do we do them back and forth? In 2020, you had to prove that you had experimental medication or you lost your job. You had to show that little card that you got the shot.
Wait, what are you talking about? Oh, okay.
The COVID.
Got it.
You had to show you had the shot. People were making fake cards because they didn't want to take the shot and endanger their lives, but you had to have it. They closed down people's businesses and shut them down. They arrested people here in New Jersey for running their business. So when it suits people in the government, they will require proof of something. They will require your papers when it suits them. That's not an American way to do it, but securing our elections is. And I think that's, for me, that's the bottom line.
To be completely fair, there was no federal mandate. That was all state-based, city-based. And again, if, I don't know, Arkansas wants to make free IDs for everybody, I'm fine with that too. As long as, again, we talked about this, I don't know if it was last time, but the federal government takes precedent, right? They have the rules that distribute to everybody. If it's unconstitutional because the Constitution says you can't do it, then you can't do it, regardless of states' rights. So, and in that same vein, it's like if New York City or New Jersey wants to do a certain thing because there's a pandemic coming through, they can do that because there's nothing in the Constitution that says otherwise.
I agree. It still doesn't make it right or wrong, even if it's local. And we can have that. I mean, everything is local in our election. If it's not in the Constitution, it's referred back to the states. That's the way our founding fathers set this all up, which is brilliant, because the local community should decide their standards. I get that. I think that's perfectly okay. But in reality, we see, depending on who it is and the reasons that they want it, things are used against us as American citizens, right? Our freedoms are used against us, and the pandemic was a perfect example. Was it dangerous? Yes. Did people die? Yes, they did. Did we have to do the things we did? We didn't. This is voting. And again, I come back to it 100 times. I can beat it like a dead horse, is that it is that important that we should secure them and make sure they're legitimate.
Did you get a chance to read there was a New York Times article that came out that was about how the Department of Homeland Security is evidently creating a database of people and specifically social media accounts of people who are anti-ICE?
I did see that.
What are your thoughts on, speaking of registering, because we're talking about registering to vote now, this is, again, something that makes me nervous about registration, right? Is now we have potentially, it sounds like, this other registration occurring that could be extremely detrimental to people and could be stepping on a lot of First Amendment rights, freedom of speech. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as a constitutionalist, I believe in the Constitution, and I think that everything has to be done for the right reason, and if it's not within the Constitution, we don't do it. So the article that I'm reading, and I watched the video from the New York Times as well as how they reported it. And I found it interesting. How you present something, the way you say it, the words you use make a big difference in how something comes across. And the reporter was saying that the Department of Homeland Security is going around to social media sites and they want to know, they want to have the accounts, the information, and the names of people who are posting stuff that is against ICE, that they don't like ICE. And they also want to see people who may be reporting where ICE is going to be doing its business. So in that statement, there's two different things that make me see it different ways. If you don't like the government, you should be able to say whatever you want, that you don't like the government. You don't get my name and my address because I spoke out about Donald Trump or I spoke out about Hillary Clinton. That's not what the government's there for. The other part that she kind of glossed over was, or people who are going to post where ICE is going to be doing their work. You can make a case that that is then interfering with a law enforcement operation, which is not allowed. So if you're posting that you don't like ICE and you think ICE is wrong and you think it's incredibly horrible what they do, that's perfectly fine. And I support you to say it, right? I might not agree with you, but I support you to say it. You don't get to go get people's names and addresses. But if the case that they're making is that this is an investigative tool, a subpoena is an investigative tool to go and see if somebody did something wrong. I use them as law enforcement. They're used every single day by courts everywhere. So if we're looking at this because people are posting, hey, ICE is going to be on this corner, and that allows wanted criminals to get away. It allows mobs to show up and interfere with the police, have conflicts with the police. Now we have to look at it different than just, well, they don't like ICE and we want to get their information. So understanding the reasoning that they're looking for this, that they're subpoenaing these records to find out who did that. If it turns out people got injured, could they be responsible, culpable, criminally for saying or doing something to incite a riot or whatever? So I think you have to really parse the two and see the reason that they're looking at. And I didn't like the way the reporter did it. She up front, they want to get the names and addresses of people who don't like ICE. That's ridiculous. Or it could be people who are posting about where ICE is doing their operations. You have to look at the two different things and figure it out. Just because you don't like ICE, no, you don't get anybody's names. I don't think that's right. You're interfering with law enforcement. You're causing a danger. You're potentially breaking a law. Yeah, then we have to know who you are. We investigate. That's how we do it. And a subpoena is a safeguard that we just don't have the government walk in and go, give me all those names, right? There has to be a reason. It comes from a court. Okay, we think you're right. You need to get that information, just like a search warrant.
To be fair, I believe, and the New York Times article did address this, a subpoena does not require a judge to write off on it, and that's sort of the difference.
It's through a court, right? So we used to
Okay,
use grand
it is.
jury subpoenas. We would go to the grand jury. The grand jury is investigating gambling. And we say, well, we have a gambling operation, and we know that we have these people are all betting with Frankie the bookie. And we want to go get his records. We have his records now. Now we want to go talk to these people and compel them to testify in front of the grand jury. So the court would give us a stack of subpoenas. Hey, guess what, Andrew? Well, you're on this list of gambling. I don't want to tell you nothing. Good. You'll come to the grand jury.
Is that easier to get than a warrant?
Yes, a subpoena is much
Okay.
easier to get. If somebody hits you in a traffic accident and you want the witness to come, you have the court give them a subpoena. You have to show up at court. It's something to compel people to participate in the system for information that you need. But it's not just something that you do willy-nilly.
Yeah. I'm actually really glad that you're here to discuss this as former law enforcement, because I have questions about this. I do want to press you first, though, and ask, you're talking a lot about it depends on the reason that they want to do this. And to me, I'm like, okay, I guess. But there's always a possibility that they say it's because of one reason and it's actually for something else. So if they come out and they're like, oh, no big deal. I think if Biden was doing this about people who have purchased firearms and was saying, oh, no, it's just so we can prosecute the criminals. Mm-hmm. But we need to have everybody registered just in case. I think there would be an enormous amount of pushback because we don't trust Joe Biden. And I think that would be warranted. And in the same way, I also don't trust this administration. I've seen a lot of things, especially from this Department of Homeland Security, Pam Bondi, all of these people. There's just been a lot of, how do I want to put this? There's been a lot of vitriol for people who speak out against ICE. I do want to say as well, it gets very close to thought crimes when you're talking about, well, and I get like, well, that's why we have a jury of your peers. But for me, saying, well, it's illegal for you to tell everyone that ICE is here under certain conditions. Like, it's obviously not against the law, or it shouldn't be against the law. The police show up at your door, you turn to the person next to you and go, hey, the police are here, right? We all agree on that. Should it be against the law to look out your window and see the police out your window and say, hey, the police are across the street? Or is it against the law to see the police across the street and type on Facebook, oh my gosh, the police are across the street? This gets very close to, well, I can tell what you were thinking. And what you were thinking was you're going to save people because, you're going to save the criminals from getting deported or whatever because you're telling everybody that ICE is in your neighborhood. And I get that sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it isn't. But there's a lot of nuance there. And I think we need specific and meticulous writing on what is allowed and what isn't. And so when you say, well, we're just doing it, it's obvious, sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it isn't. I think we need to know, is it okay to tell people the police are at the door or to tell people the police are across the street, or is it not? And for me, for freedom of speech and for what I understand of the Constitution, it needs to be okay.
And you know what? You are on the right path here. Understanding the specific reason is what makes the difference. So if I just want to alert all my neighbors that the police are in the neighborhood and I get on a bullhorn, hey, the cops are in the neighborhood, because we just all don't like the cops and we want to know they're here. But if I know that my neighbor Bill next door is wanted out of Oklahoma for bank robbery and he says he didn't do it and I like him and I say, hey, Bill, the cops are outside, I'm doing that so that he can escape justice. I am now preventing law enforcement from taking this person into custody. I've been on a lot of cases where we were after one particular guy. He committed a very brutal robbery, almost killed a security person. We knew he was in an apartment. We had a warrant for him. We showed up and knocked on the door, and his girlfriend answered the door. And, we were very cautious. We didn't know if he had weapons or this and that, but we had to knock on the door. And she's standing there, and I said, hey, listen, we're looking for Frank. Is Frank here? We have a warrant for Frank. No, Frank's not here. I said, if Frank is here, you are hindering his apprehension. You're going to get charged yourself. Don't do that. Just tell us where he is. He's not here. He's not here. So we asked for permission to search. And she said yes, and she gave us consent to search. We went in, and he was hiding underneath the bed. And we arrested him, and then we arrested her because she knew he was there. She was trying to prevent us from doing a lawful thing, take him into custody. So just saying the police are in the neighborhood, no, I think everybody has a right to say that. Call all your neighbors. Tell them that the cops are here. If the purpose, though, is to hinder the operation of the police, that's a problem. How do you know that in every instance? You don't. And that's why I'm a big proponent of doing investigations. The difference is I can trust the law enforcement. You don't.
Yeah.
Is that legitimate? It is, because just like the voting, I think having ID is going to make it right. You think having ID is not going to make a difference. We all have these opinions. That's why we have set up rules of how to do things. Requesting a search warrant is a very big deal. If it turns out you lied in an affidavit to get a search warrant, you can be held criminally liable for lying to the court to get a search warrant. I believe in that 1,000%. With a subpoena, if you use bad information to get it, there should be an investigation. And how would you know that? Somebody would say, I heard the officer say this. I knew the inside thing. I'm blowing the whistle. You investigate and find out they did things wrong. They should be held to account. That is, I don't want anybody getting my information just because they don't like me on this show. And I want to find out who Joe is. Yeah. Wrong. If I did something wrong and they can make a case for that, well, then that's part of our system.
Yeah, or the next Democratic president who gets into places like, gets into power is like, well, I'm going to make an executive order that we're rounding up all the people who said bad things about the Democrats. And then all of a sudden it's
exactly.
like,
back in the day, they went after the Tea Party.
Yeah.
Right? They used the power of government to go after the Tea Party. The Trump administration, whether you like them or not, and you see all of the cases that they made up against him that have been thrown out because they were politically charged. That's not just bad for Republicans and Trump. That's bad for you. That's bad for everybody. That should never happen in our country. We have to put an end to that. And the way we do that is say, agree on the rules. How are we going to do this? We might not like the outcome, but if it's done legitimately, that's the rule.
He was found guilty, I think, on 34 felonies, but we'll move on.
Yeah, of things that had never been charged before.
Right,
come on, we can all. If there's an old saying in law enforcement: if I follow you around all day, I will find a reason to stop you and arrest you.
Sure,
all day. If I do that. Now, if I take a law that's used,
I want to be clear, not me. He's not talking about me.
No.
I've always done everything by the books.
I've subpoenaed his records. He's okay. The reality is, you had an unprecedented use of the system to go after one particular person. If they did this in New York all the time against business people, I'd say, guess what? You got caught up in it. Yeah. You did something wrong. They targeted him. That is an unfair use of the law. That in and of itself should bother you more than the fact that he got convicted of 34 things that they rolled out and steamrolled him. Because if they did it to him, they could do it to you. See, that's the thing about going after Trump with these things. You might not like Trump, but if they did it to him, they could do it to you because you and me are nobody. This guy was the president of the United States, and they did this to him.
Yeah,
that's the danger.
He did a lot of stuff that I have never done, but I understand what you're saying. Like when I jaywalked or something, they could do that to me in theory as well, or turned without a blinker, which I don't do. You should always use your blinker. I do want to say before we move on as well that regardless of what we are saying in our opinions on the New York Times article that we've been referencing, there was a 2023 ruling from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, Friend versus Gasparino, I think is how that's pronounced, that established that warning people about police checkpoints by holding signs or by blowing whistles or things like that is protected speech under the First Amendment. So that is what the Court of Appeals currently says. That can always change. Obviously, we've seen a lot of overturns in the past few years, but that's where we're at with that.
Right. And that's how when we see our courts, That's how we have precedents that are set, and the courts go by precedents of things that happened before. But then there's a new set of circumstances that come up that, hey, maybe the original cases that set that precedent didn't have these things to consider, so we will look at it again. And that's how they change a precedent. Something else comes in. And that's an evolving system based on facts, not just on people's opinions, right? So that does happen. There's a court case today, this is the law, and tomorrow it's overturned because it's different.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that things like Roe v. Wade were not, the issue was not, oh, we know a lot more now. The issue is that there are different people in those positions who disagree with the people who were there before them.
Yeah, and we're going to have that forever because when the next group of Democrats come in and they don't like the fact that the courts have said you can carry a gun across it, you have a right, that's a Second Amendment right, and they come in and they twist the law to say no, you can't. And
we see this all the time with executive orders as well, right? Like
exactly.
Trump undid all of Obama's executive orders, and then someone will come in and undo all of Trump's.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what always happens.
It's a back and forth. All right, so let's see. There's some other things going on in the news that I think we want to talk about. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is a representative out of New York. She apparently, she's a very capable young woman. She got herself elected. She has become a centerpiece of Democrat politics. Her philosophies are actually, some people would say, leading the party now. She's being tolerated by the older lions in the party because they're scared to death of her. Chuck Schumer, she said, I might run for his seat, and he's scared to death. So therefore, he's going to do things to try and appease her. Stay in the Congress. Leave me alone. Let me stay here forever. We're seeing her wing of the party, the more radical wing, rise in that party, and that's causing some problems. So recently, she was over in Munich. There was a lot of people over in Munich, and it was a security conference. And she shows up with some other Democrat personnel, and it turned into an anti-Trump diatribe. So I guess the first thing I want to see, did you see that? And then she was asked some questions, and she stumbled very badly. She didn't just not have an answer. She stumbled very badly. You could see her inexperience. You could see her inability to think on her feet. It pointed out a lot of things. I don't think it helped her case for going further, but in politics, that doesn't always matter. Did you see that? And what did you think of her performance?
Yeah, I did see, I think she was there for multiple days, or at least there were multiple events where she was speaking and being asked questions. I definitely saw a couple of them. I agree with you. Look, it's interesting because she was only asked a couple of questions. I think you had pointed out there were other people there as well, and they directed, a couple of questions to each of them. For the most part, I think this is kind of a nothing burger. She stammered a little bit. If you look at it, it was like for 6 seconds, and she was asked a difficult question. If China goes to war with Taiwan, should the U.S. step in? And to me, it's kind of like asking, if Germany and France go to war, should we defend France? I don't know. I need way more information than that. And do I have an opinion on that? I do. Does AOC have an opinion on that? I'm honestly not sure. I don't know that she's ever thought about it. That being said, if she is there, she probably should have thought about it. She's going to be asked a question like that. It's all about international politics. That being said, she's one of, 435 U.S. representatives. She represents one zip code, basically, of the United States. It's weird to me that we're asking 435th of the U.S. representatives, what are your thoughts on Taiwan and China? And if she doesn't, she's also 36 years old. She's barely in politics. I know the right keeps saying she's like the main person that's going to definitely run in 2028. I just don't see that. I think Gavin Newsom, unfortunately, and that's a topic we can get into in another episode, because I'm not a big fan of Gavin Newsom, but I think he's going to be the front runner for sure. I think AOC I think she has very new and fresh ideas, and that's why the spotlight is always on her. But if we're going to criticize her for stumbling over a question when the commander of chief answered a question about getting oil with, I think if we had got the oil, something very good happen or something, and we just had Joe Biden, and nobody really, other than the right, no one on the left criticized him for, doing half the insane stuff that he did. He would just say crazy stuff all the time. He had the most gaffes in presidential history. And then we have Trump, who frankly is a close second. AOC stumbles once or twice. It's huge news because she never does. And that's what I think we're seeing.
Well, and I think you're probably right in some of that. The reason that people are pointing this out, I think, is because she is, and her philosophy is a leader of her party. Whether we like it or not,
Hard
she
disagree.
is.
I'm sorry. But there's like 4 people in Congress who share her beliefs and ideas.
Right. And those people seem to be shaping the way the party's gone. They just did a poll the other day, and it showed over the last 15 years or whatever, has the Democrat Party gone too far to the left? And it was 42%, 48%. Now it's 56% of people think it's going too far. Well, it's not going too far because of an old guy like Chuck Schumer. It's going too far because of the Squad. It's going too far because of AOC.
To be fair, though, a lot of people held those beliefs way before AOC took office. Or
I agree,
Mamdani.
but they didn't get the spotlight that she gets. Now, she gets the spotlight. She's from New York.
Yeah.
She's an attractive young woman. She speaks
She's an
normally
underdog,
pretty
too.
well.
Like, no one expected her to win.
She came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
She is a success story in politics, and that makes her, because she is young and vibrant and has new ideas, which when you look, her ideas are actually old communist ideas, but the way she's speaking about them, she's a firefly in the room, and that attracts people's attention. Therefore, you're right. You know, if you go to a security conference, you think you would get over there and find out about some security stuff. Now, we can talk about what goes on with Taiwan, because I have ideas and thoughts on that myself, different than maybe they were historically to what we would actually do today. But that's a major point of contention for the United States and our policy. I think the only thing she said right in that answer, other than she did stumble and it did look bad. But you know what? I'm a public speaker. You're a public speaker. You go out and sometimes you lose your train of thought. You stumble over a word or two. It happens when you go out there. She was so caught off guard by that question, as though she had never thought about something that could lead to World War III tomorrow, and she wants to be a leader. She's sitting there denigrating the current president of the United States on foreign soil, and she gets asked a question like that could lead to World War III. She has no clue what she's talking about. Well, she has every right to be there. What is she doing? She's not ready for prime time. And I don't say that because I don't like her. I don't like her policies, but I think she revealed a lot about her that she's not ready yet. Now, in 5 years, 10 years, she might be. Should she go back and read a book about the policy? The only thing she got right was, well, that's been policy for a long time. If they asked her a follow-up, well, what exactly is the policy? I don't think she'd have any idea what to answer.
To be fair,
that's why it came off so bad.
I hear you. To be fair, the next part she said right after that, and this is, again, to be fair, because I didn't like this answer either, but it was a very standard politician question, or politician answer, which was, well, we would do what we can to make it so we don't get to that point. You know, what are you going to do if China attacks Taiwan? Well, they won't, because we're going to do the right thing, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen.
That was a good recovery after that.
I even disagree with that. I understand what you mean.
It was a good political recovery.
As soon as you fall flat on your face, sort of stumbling up is a good recovery.
And then I think the interviewer and everybody, you could see if you look at the people in the room, they were like,
I think as well, though, it's
a
difficult question to answer when you're a politician in the spotlight as much as her, because you're going to piss off everyone no matter what you say.
Yes. But isn't that your job as a representative, to say what you think and feel? So when I looked at that answer and I watched her stumble, I as a public speaker, I felt bad for her, because
me too.
But when you look beyond that, when you peel it away, why couldn't she answer that question? Have you ever watched these people on these panels? They're testifying in front of Congress about the relationships in sports and this and that. What is a woman? You know darn well they know what the answer is, but they can't say it because they have to protect their constituents, and they have to believe everyone that they believe this stuff. And you see them fighting. Well, she was fighting because she probably wants to say, we should do nothing. We should do nothing. We should let Taiwan should go back. That might be her real opinion. I don't know that it is. But she got hit with that, and she can't say her real opinion. So she was stuck with, what do I say?
Yeah.
And like I said, I understood that, because I've been in a position, somebody asks you something you're not prepared for or is really uncomfortable. How do you say it correctly so you don't offend people? Look at us. You and I are sitting here answering questions. We're trying to be honest with our opinions. And somebody out there in the audience could be totally offended by something you or I say, and they start to accuse us of other things because we gave an answer, right? So I get that. When you're in this position, you have to be careful. I just find it was revealing. And the other part of that question I wanted to ask you, and I know our time is moving here. There used to be a time when if you were a American politician or dignitary of some kind, and you were on foreign soil, you did not denigrate the president of the United States or our country or our government. You had that dignity to say, hey, yeah, you don't like him, but he's mine, and we're not going to do that. They went over there specifically as a group to denigrate the president on the world stage. And as you said, Gavin Newsom, he'll be gone soon, and then I'll be here, and we'll all go back to the same nonsense we did before. You won't have to pay for NATO. We'll do everything. How did you feel about that as an American?
As far as like going over to another country and going to this thing specifically to badmouth the president of the United States, absolutely fine. And not just because I'm in the position and in favor of the policies that I'm in and dislike the current president so much. Honestly, if that same group of people went over there to badmouth Joe Biden when he was president, I'd have been like, great, get him to do something. Like the issue that I think a lot of us are having and have had is that the Democrats are the do-nothing Democrats. And then those of us who are trying to pull the Democrats to the left, and there's very few of us trying to do that, are even more frustrated because that's the other thing. You're like, yeah, back in the day, it was considered bad form to do that. And I think you'll agree with this, for better or worse, we've never had a president like Trump before. He's a very different kind of guy. And I wanted to add as well to one of the points you were making, one of the things that made me so disappointed in her response, AOC's response on Taiwan, is that it is so unlike what she normally is like in public. People will ask her, how did you feel about Hakeem Jeffries saying that you shouldn't, we shouldn't look at socializing these programs? And she'll be like, he's wrong. Like very, very blunt. In fact, what won my vote for Joe Biden, because I was very hesitant for a long time. He was the person I wanted the least out of the primaries in the Democratic Party. But what won him my vote was he was asked two questions in the debate, which Donald Trump did not attend, but so was just Joe Biden. But he's asked many questions, but two in particular that stick out to me. One is, when you wrote this particular piece of legislation, I don't remember what it was, it ended up having negative effects. Do you think you made a mistake? And he could have given a political answer like AOC did in this example. And instead what he said was, yes, full stop. I made a mistake. I should not have written this legislation and ended up being terrible. He was asked another question that was, if you lose to Trump, what do you think that means for you as a politician? He said, I think it means I'm a bad candidate.
And you'd have to say those are legitimate answers. And how refreshing if our politicians would just answer the question. How many times do you see them? Do you think there should be 300 bags of garbage on the corner? Well, let me tell you about the way sunshine comes down. And they obfuscate completely, and they never answer a question. And they dance around it, and both sides do it. And it's frustrating when it happens because they are there to be held accountable to us, the American citizens. We voted for you because you are supposed to represent us. Therefore, we want to hear your opinion. When you're asked a question, you should answer it. For the longest time, in the fantasy world of how you could make things better, you say, I would have a law that would say if you're a politician and you're asked a question, you will answer that question. And if you don't, you'll be thrown out of office for both sides. You don't get to obfuscate, dance around, come up with 47 other things. Answer the question. Why don't they want to answer the question? Because they have self-interest. If I say the wrong thing, it's going to hurt me. I'm not going to get reelected. And it is just frustrating as an American citizen, no matter who's doing it. You're asked the question by us. Answer the question.
I think that's one of the main things that a lot of people like about Trump as well, right? It's like, for better or worse, he's asked a question and he just says, I don't like you, or like, I don't like this thing, or I hate this thing, or I want to do that, or I want to go away from this. Mm-hmm. He's kind of, you're going to disagree with this sentiment, but he's kind of like a child in that way, where it's like you ask a kid like, hey, what are you up to? And he's like, I just pooped in my pants, or whatever. Yeah. Like he will just say whatever's on his mind.
But he does answer you. Yeah. Like he'll talk to them on the airplane. He'll talk to them going to the helicopter. He'll talk to them in between dinner. You can't say that the guy hides from you. You might not like what he says, and he may say it inarticulately at times, but he's going to answer your question. And I think that's a good thing, that at least he answers the question. You get some idea, what's he thinking? This is the guy that's in charge of our government, really it has a lot to do with what goes on in the world. I'd like to know what's on his mind. And if I disagree, I say, I'm a little concerned about that, but at the same time, thanks for answering the question. I find that is refreshing. And I think because he's not one of these politicians that grew up being a politician that, hey, I just got to stay in office because, it's pretty lucrative for me to stay in office. So let me dance my way around everything because, first of all, depending on who I am, the media is going to cover me. Number two, the spin room is going to spin everything that I didn't mean it and take it back, and it'll all be fine. So I'm just not going to answer. He doesn't have that compulsion. He has the compulsion to answer your question, to tell you what's on his mind. He's a CEO that's in charge of company America.
Yeah, I do want to point out he did make $1.4 billion off of cryptocurrency last year. But, so he's doing his own thing. But I hear your point, which is that, like, whether he hems and haws over specific points has nothing to do with that. I do. Did you see anything about Mamdani and the? He's talking with property owners about what's the word? Do you know what I'm talking about? He's having hearings with property owners in New York City about the cost of living and about how much they're charging for rent and about the quality of living in those apartments.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is pretty interesting. Look, he ran on what Trump ran on, frankly, which is, I was actually going to bring that up in our last topic as well about, I find that a lot of AOC's policies, I see, first of all, the right is largely in favor of, children. What's the word I'm looking for? Now I'm doing my best AOC impression.
Yes.
They're largely in charge of like family leave, let's say, and or not charged. They're largely in favor of family leave. They're largely in favor of childcare. They're largely in favor. Healthcare is a big issue, right? Mm-hmm. The left has their ideas of how to fix that. Trump even said when he was running in 2016 about he said that everyone's going to be covered under health insurance when I'm president. And the interviewer said, how are you going to pay for that? And he said, the government's going to pay for it, which to me is universal health care, which is what the left has been fighting for forever. And here we are doing something that both Mamdani and Trump ran on, which was affordability. And he's trying to fix affordability in New York City, which God bless him. Good luck, because it only gets more and more expensive every time I visit. But one of the ways he's doing that is looking at the renting of apartments. And he's meeting with landlords. He's having hearings with tenants who are raising complaints about specific buildings and about specific landlords. Do you think that this is a good idea? Do you think that it's largely for show? What do you think about this?
Okay. I have to look at it and say, first of all, if you have people living in an apartment building, I own an apartment building, there are rules about how my apartment has to function. The heat has to function, the water has to function, the sewage has to function. It's my obligation, my responsibility to make sure those things work. When they don't, I need to go in there, spend the money, and get them fixed. The rent is the money that is exchanged based on the value of my asset. I bought a building not to be a nice guy. Now that's going to sound strange, but I didn't buy a building. I didn't buy a car wash to make sure everyone had nice, clean cars in town. I bought it as an asset to make money, to be a business.
There's a difference between a for-profit company and a not-for-profit
Correct.
company. Yeah.
So when I see him go in, and he said something the other night, and he's starting to reveal himself and what he actually believes and the things that people said, and I think we're going to find it's problematic. But he says we're going to get rid of the difficulty of rugged individualism, and we're going to replace it with the warmth of collectivism. That sounds wonderful. It really does. It is rugged individualism that made America, which made capitalism, which made all of us be able to have the life that we have, that we don't have anywhere else in the world. When I see what he's doing with these buildings, if he's going to call these landlords together and hold them to account, you will fix your buildings. You will invest in these buildings so that they function properly. That's the asset you have, but it's a dual asset. You own it to make money, I get it, but you also have people living there. So you will follow the laws to make sure that the buildings are livable, that they have the proper equipment that they're supposed to have. I 100% make sure you hold those slumlords to account, because I've seen how many stories over the years of that, and it's horrific. But to go in and start to say, well, you can't charge any more for your rent. Matter of fact, your rent has to come down. I looked, your bank account. I subpoenaed your bank account and found out that you have $800 million, which means you could live very well on $500 million. So therefore, you're going to lower your rents $300 million to make it more affordable. That is going down a road that is going to fail like it has failed every single time the government gets in centralized power and tries to control how things go. It's not human nature. It never works. There might be a short-term hurrah, but those people are going to then neglect their buildings. They are going to sell out their buildings. They're going to leave the city. How many people have left the city and taken their money and everything with them and their businesses all over the country in these blue states? Because they're not going to put up with it. You can't just say, because I have money, you get to reach in my pocket and take it because I have more than you. Everybody that has $1 more than you is a rich guy. So you don't need that extra dollar, Andrew. I'm going to take it from you because I need it, right? And I think this is going to lead to ruin for the city in the long run, because it has never worked, those kind of things. Holding them to account to the law, 100%, I would back him up 100%. Make sure those buildings are appropriate. And if you own them, your responsibility is to invest in them. If not, sell them to someone who will take care of them. Those people deserve good housing, whoever's living in the building.
To be completely clear as well for everybody watching and listening, the majority, did you watch his speech on this that he gave?
No, I saw clips.
Gotcha. He, almost all of it was about making it easier because tenants don't know what to do. Like, who do you contact if your landlord's not doing something? And that's most of what he's been talking about, is making it so that there's a phone number and everybody knows what it is. We're going to put it on social media. I'm going to make a video about it. So everybody, especially young people, they have no idea. They're living in an apartment for the first time. Who do I call when my landlord refuses to fix the hot water? I don't know what to do, So I hear you there. I do think as well, there's some animosity that is certainly biased that I hold towards a lot of landlords and sort of the landlord culture in general. I was unemployed recently. Excuse me. I was unemployed recently, and on the it was New York State unemployment. And on the manual that they give you for how unemployment works, it says the hours that you volunteer for a charity or a nonprofit will be counted as work. So those hours go against how much unemployment you can get. That being said, any amount of money that you receive or hours that you get that you put into being a landlord or a super for a place that you owe, you can still get unemployment for that. There's a lot of very strange things that pertain to, it's weird. There's no other job. There's no other way you get income where you kind of don't do anything. And I say that as respectfully as I can with you hire a super or whatever. I mean, you can be the super if you want to, but you can also hire a super. But it is on paper, it's kind of not doing anything and getting income. So to me, I'm if you have to get a job in order to meet in the middle and only get a little bit off of your rental properties, I'm kind of okay with that. But I also do want to respect all that. And, I do understand, like I said, I've known many people who have owned properties that they've rented out. It's not doing nothing. It's not sitting on your couch all day.
Right. It's interesting. You look at someone who's a business of being a landlord is like the business of running an electronics company or running a car dealership. The people that own those places, they're not out on the floor selling cars and selling oil changes and putting in transmissions. They're sitting in an office strategizing. How do I move my business forward? How do I sell 10 more cars? How do I do this? How do I do that? We can't look at the labor that people put in and try and say, well, it's not the same as the people who are doing the work, because that person owns the business. They struggled for the business. They sacrificed for the business. And their job is different. I used to see people that I worked for and I'd say, boy, they got it easy. Why aren't they down here doing? Because that's not the job. I got hired for this job and this person owns the business. And when you start to understand that, just because the landlord lives in a beautiful penthouse apartment because everyone pays their rent, That's his business. That's his model to make money.
To be fair, he didn't get hired. He already had enough money to do that.
Well, sometimes, you know what? I don't get upset with people that inherit money.
I hear you.
You know, I mean, I have children. I would love to be able to say to them, here's $2 million when I go. We all want to take care of our family. Some people get more lucky than other people. That's just the reality.
I hear you. I want to add as well, you're saying, there's differences. Some people have a lot of money. Some people are good enough to do this, whatever. I do want to point out, New York City is also a very different place. And as someone who has lived in New York City apartments, holy God in heaven, this man has to do something about this. I frequently went entire weeks without hot water.
Unacceptable.
Right.
Unacceptable.
It has to be fixed. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I'm glad. How long has he been mayor? 3 hours? Like, I'm glad he's doing something. Right. I'm glad to see him publicly moving this forward because it has to be fixed yesterday. So I, for one, am glad to see it. We'll see what comes of it. Again, he's barely been the mayor, so I'm glad to see he's at least doing stuff.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, it's a responsibility you have. It's a business. There's an expected level of care you have as an owner of any business. And if normally people can walk away from your business, they don't like the way you treat them, they don't like the food you serve, they don't like the whatever, they don't patronize your business. In an apartment, you're in that apartment, where you're going to just go down the block. Well, I heard somebody say a long time ago that my kids want to live in this city and they can't afford to do it. And I said, then guess what? You can't live in the city. Yeah. You know, that's unfortunate. Well, we grew up here. Our family was here. You can't afford it. There's no jobs here. Well, then go to where the jobs are. You know, that's a reality of sometimes we have to change what we want for what's available. And the whole affordability thing, yes, I have kids that are trying to get started and do their thing, and it's very expensive. But we can't have the government centralize things and dictate how things will be. We can have a better economy.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I think that about does it for us this time through. This has been Perspective Exchange. Thanks for watching or listening wherever you have been doing that. I am Andrew Dunn. This is my co-host, Joe Pangaro. What do you want to say?
I want to say thank you very much for paying attention. We are trying to have conversations to talk, right? Exchange ideas, get the name, connect the dots. So thank you for being there. And we'd love to hear from you, because we might even read some of the things that you say.
Let's not say things we can't take back. We'll see.
We'll see. Thank you for being here. And remember, be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem.
And remember, find a penny, pick it up all day long. You'll have a penny. Thanks for watching.